Sunshine Week is an annual event that is so very important to people who care about informed consent and a democracy. If you want to have a society where we can make our own decisions collectively and come up with the best decisions, we really need to have freedom of information. What it allows for is that any citizen, anyone in the whole society, has the right to go in and get access to public information and public records. And you can look at the actual original source and make up your own mind. So in this time when misinformation and people are spinning things, the ability to go back to the ground, to the original fact point, to the information as presented, and to, for yourself, make up your own mind, or to share that information then with your community, this is how we ensure that we have a healthy democracy. So it's so fundamental that every year we try to celebrate Sunshine Week, and we hope that you'll join us. Let me go ahead and welcome everybody to our second session in our mini series for Sunshine Week, talking about freedom of information, the role of media in informing our community about things we need to know, and the importance of that, and how is it to do that? How is it to actually deliver on that possibility and so we've invited folks who are out working in the media to share back, how are things going and how are things looking. So at our last session, we had a chance to sort of ask about how has it been and where are we now, and how do we, what's it look like sort of up to this point. And today we want to focus on what do we think is going to happen next, or what's our future look like, the short-term and long-term prospects. And before we get started, what we'll do is go around and say hi to our panelists and have them introduce themselves. These are standalone programs, so even though you introduced yourselves last time, you have to do it again this time. And just let us know who you are, and what sort of who are you representing, and what are you doing here today. So I will be a little more directed than Mo was and call people out. So I'm going to ask Jennifer to kick us off. And we're not hearing you yet.
I'm so glad I could be the first one who doesn't know she's muted. Now you're all free.
It's done. It's been done.
Yeah, I'm your grandma trying to FaceTime you right now. So my name is Jennifer Fumiko Cahill, and I'm from the North Coast Journal. I'm the arts and features editor there. And I'm sorry Thad couldn't be with us today, but I will be, talking behind his back the whole time. And yeah, thank you so much for putting this on.
Great. And Joseph, can you go next?
Okay, I'm Joseph Orozco. Last time I was from the Humboldt Travel Radio, KEID FM. I can also change representation, KWDR, which is not a radio station. It's just 4 letters that I use. Wolfden Radio. I just like the K before things. And I don't know, it may be, as I was talking to the hot air, maybe I will start something. Don't know. I guess that's what we're going to talk about. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this. This is really nice.
Thanks, Joseph. And Nerilee.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nerilee, and I'm here as the station manager of Humboldt Hot Air.
Great. And in case I didn't say, I'm Sean McLaughlin. I'm executive director for Access Humboldt, and I'm mostly here to convene, but of course I'll chime in here and there for Access Humboldt and some of our efforts as well. So I think in the immediate, to set the stage, I think we just have to say things are different now with the pandemic, right? I mean, the whole society has gone through this big shift, and certainly the media landscape has been impacted. So I wonder if we can say a few things about some of the ways that your organizations had to pivot to accommodate COVID, sort of the urgency of timely information, the changing information that people got, the lack of trust in information, and all those sorts of things. So what were some of the specific needs of the communities that you found and that you had to adapt to address? And if you don't mind, Joseph, I'm going to ask you to start off because I know you had some very particular issues out in the Hoopa Valley.
Well, the particular issues that we had is we started early. The tribe saw this coming, and they had their medical facilities start teaching us what are the best protocols to follow. And so the tribal government at that time, they start laying down the laws. This is what we're going to do. We even attempted to close our borders. And actually that made the press. And they thought, okay, we can't block the highway because it's a state highway, but we can restrict access to tribal property. So anything that's off the highway is out of bounds. You could drive through, just keep going. And that was the thinking at that time. What changed for us as a media? Nothing. We're still part of the emergency system, and regardless of whatever happens, if nothing happens, we're still there. They rely on us all the time, and that's when we get the most audience, is when things go wrong and people tune us in because we have the information, or we have access to the information. And the council and the chairman made sure that people were tuning into the radio station by providing a daily service. They even tried to do 7 days a week on us, and it got kind of iffy. You go, well, man, goodness, I'm easing out of this thing, and now you want me to, And so I kind of skated on that. I didn't show up on Sunday and found out, well, they didn't do anything on Sunday, the first Sunday. And they decided, well, maybe we don't need to do 7 days. Let's just do 5 days. And so that's what they did. Noon time, every weekday, they had chairman. He pulled together a whole team of the emergency response teams, the Kamal Medical Center, education departments, including the Unified School District, fire departments, and just had this panel discussion about what's the situation. How do
So you had a new daily program.
A daily program, and it lasted almost an hour. Not sometimes it lasts 20 minutes, but that was what we did. It was at 12 noon hour too, so I had already been there for 5 hours, and there I was again. But that was nice, and you look back on it, and we've got all those programs archived. We haven't done anything with them. But, a lot of really good information. And so,
Okay, but your workflow, you were able to continue doing your usual production workflows and things either remotely or just because you're isolated enough in your workspaces?
yes, and what also happened, because we are a corporation for a public broadcasting station, and they have this community service grant, and Congress gave them extra money, or somebody gave them extra money, the very first CARE grant that came out, we were a recipient and got $112,000. So that was a real shot in the arm for us, because that meant that, hey, I can retire. I have a pathway. Step aside as a manager, hire another manager, and leave this money to pay my full-time wages, 40 hours a week for 1 year and 30 hours a week for the second year, which I'm in almost 6 months now of that one. And then I'm out and hire another manager. That was a plan. Another good plan. And then after that, we got another one, another $207,000, because that's the American CARES.
Right.
I don't know what we're going to do with all that money.
Do you think your
tell
listenership
anyone.
went up? Do you think your listenership went up? I mean, were people needing to really wanting to get that daily update?
Yep.
Did you get a lot of feedback about that?
What we did find out was that we were still only talking to the older crew. we were not attracting the younger people. They still wanted to get their information off Facebook. So we had to incorporate Facebook into our operation, start broadcasting live on Facebook. So
Mhm.
that helped. So that was another shift that we did.
Okay, thanks. Jennifer, I think North Coast Journal is a little bigger shop, but also a different calendar. So how did it look from your side?
It looked wild.
Mhm.
We were already a dispersed office by the time lockdown came. We had decided like, "Look, this does not look good. We can do this dispersed." And actually we had practiced doing so, the blackouts, and, we had already been, dispersed working on stories during the power outages, posted up in, hospitals and, waiting rooms and places like that, just for mooching Wi-Fi, etc. And, we had been, at one point, I think we were in a hotel room in Blue Lake. But we had kind of gotten a system down of being able to communicate, organize, and doing things dispersed. So we did. And then lockdown came, and we started switching to really practical content at first, really focusing on reader service in terms of what the rules were, what's okay, what's not okay, according to, state mandates. We did some sort of changes in, of course, my end of the paper is largely arts and entertainment, arts and features, and that all shut down, as you know.
Yeah.
And so our entire calendar, we had all the space and almost nothing to put in it. So what we did was we kind of called out to the community, and we were like, hey, we are going to have to figure out how to get through this together. So if you are doing stuff by Zoom, if you are doing stuff remotely, if you are doing stuff, streaming, etc., share it with us. And we started putting in more and more virtual stuff, which has remained. And we also devoted a big portion of the calendar section to resources. So information about, like, if you're senior and you need, help dealing with everything from moving furniture to like the stress of the pandemic, here are some numbers you can call. Here's some resources for applying for money, and, et cetera, et cetera. So we had these big sections of everything from like where to get firewood to, we usually have some of that, but we went hard on it. And we basically were just like, anybody who wants to share information about ways that people can get help each other, places to drop off masks, et cetera, et cetera. We ran all that in the calendar, and that took up a lot of space because Humboldt was really mobilized and really, trying to help one another, which was very impressive. The other thing was we started doing the updates on the COVID numbers daily. That has changed recently because partly the way that those numbers get determined don't necessarily reflect as straightforwardly as one might think, and as we were sort of brought to believe about how the numbers are rising and falling. So over a larger stretch, the averages make sense, but for Monday's numbers don't correspond to Monday necessarily. So we've switched how we report on that. And we've done a lot of switching on how we report on stuff. We also, we had to, because again, much of our advertising, the money that comes in that
Went
pays for the
away.
journal,
Yeah.
we're a free paper, but what you pay for is your eyes look at ads in the paper. So when you say to yourself, what are all these ads doing here? They're paying for your paper, so you don't got to pay for it. So when those fell away, I'm not gonna lie, it was scary. We had some thin papers, and we had staff have to cut hours. We had to lay off staff temporarily, and it was tough. So we were reporting on more stories because things were constantly changing. Things were in a constant state of emergency with fewer reporters hours. And it was hard, and it was scary to not be with the team that, and God love them, they all hung in there. Everybody stayed. And when it was possible for them to come back, they came back. And we even reached out to our readership and offered membership and asked for donations. And people really stepped up and got us through that. And, you know, our advertising team going nuts. Again, a skeleton crew. They got us through a really tough patch. And, you know, I had my doubts at different times. And, but yeah, we had a colossal amount to cover and fewer people to do it. And those of us who were left and those of us who were part-timing it, I mean, imagine the stress. You still got to pay rent. You've still got to do all this stuff, right?
Maybe
And
you have
we're
to
all
homeschool. Maybe you
separated.
have to homeschool somebody.
Exactly. There's kids at home. It's just, it's chaotic and it's uncertain. I got to say that the mental health toll that it took on, I think, reporters nationwide and probably worldwide was rough.
Mhm.
And at the same time, you know, we're not in a bubble. We don't report from like a helicopter. We're having the same problems. You know, people in our company, people at the Journal were having loved ones they knew get COVID. You know,
Right.
we lost people. It was hard. It was a hard time. And we were away from our families. We were going through all the same stuff and reporting on it.
Now-
It was hard too to decide when to go do something in person. It became more clear as the pandemic wore on what was safe. But in the beginning, it was like, okay, do we send somebody into a giant protest to go film and take pictures when we don't know if it's safe, right? But we covered, and you know, I say this is we, the Journal, but I mean, really local media in general covered, you know, Black Lives Matters protests, covered all kinds of calamity, you know, power outages, storms, fires. Oh my God, the fires. Did all that stuff while going through it all and while, you know, strapped for hours, strapped for resources. And it was brutal. I don't want to go back and do it, but I'm really proud of what the team did. And some of the stuff that we switched in terms of how we cover, because I think that was part of your question, right? Was how
The pivot,
food.
the COVID pivot.
Yeah. So I cover a lot of food. And just as like my music writer, Colin Yo, didn't have shows to talk about anymore, he switched to doing the occasional music review when people released videos, albums, tracks, etc. And, you know, we had a different take on the food thing. So suddenly the thought of like, you know, talking about who has great milkshakes while restaurant servers weren't sure if they were going to, you know, get a disease, get fired, whatever.
The front lines, yeah, the frontliners.
Yeah. So we switched to really focusing on the impact on local restaurants, both owners, people who were working there, and people who worked in restaurants and food service in general, everywhere from supermarkets to, you know, restaurants. They were taking some of the harshest brunt of, for example, anti-masker rage. They were taking some of the hardest hits in terms of economics while being declared essential, right? You're essential. We love you. You guys are great. And I'm going to throw an absolute fit if you ask me to wear a mask. So there was a lot to cover. And so we sort of shifted our focus onto what is this doing to our food world. And then we also weren't comfortable in the beginning before we really knew how, you know, before we had better information on how COVID was transmitted, the thought of sending people like, hey, here's a place you should go get takeout didn't exactly feel right, because we were like, are we unnecessarily exposing people, you know, to potential contagion? We had to really think through and research before we could just sort of do everything. So we had to think about reader service. We had to think about And most of the time when we think about reader service, we think of the end user of food, the person who goes to a restaurant, but
Mhm.
our readers include our whole community. And that
Mhm.
includes the people who are working, the people who were still on dairy farms, the people who were,
Mhm.
um, so we shifted a lot of that, and I was very grateful that, um, for example, we got some really great work out of Kim Ware did a phenomenal job just holding it down in terms of like
Mhm.
the daily grind of it. Thad cranked out, I don't know how many covers, just delving into a million different aspects. It seemed like we were under no shortage of stories.
Mhm.
Iridiana
Mhm.
Casares was fantastic in her ability to really reach into communities we hadn't reached in before, particularly to look at the impact of COVID on the Latino community. The Latinx community here and across the country really felt it pretty hard.
Mhm.
Communities of color did, but particularly Latinx communities. And so there were a lot of skills that were valuable before became invaluable.
Mhm.
And yeah, it really shifted us, and I think has shifted the way that we go forward now.
Mhm. Thanks, Jennifer. Before I ask Narrowly to chime in, I want to ask you, Jennifer. I mean, you've been a weekly print
Mhm.
publication. Obviously, that's not all you do. You have a website and do now more other outlets and so forth. You mentioned the daily updates.
Mhm.
Do you think this like totally accelerated does it push you off of what some of us love about a weekly, which is you're going to take your time and give me a more thoughtful analysis, but now you have to crank something out every day. Now you're more like my other outlets anyway, you know what sorry. I don't mean
No,
to, I don't mean to be
I get what you mean.
subjective
And
about it, but
for a while there, it was hard to do deep dives because we had fewer people, but we've always been, for the past, I don't know, how long have I been at the journal? I don't know. It's like almost a decade. Um, we've been doing daily stuff on NCJ Daily, or the website has been updating
right.
this whole time. We leaned into it more in the past several years,
Mhm.
but the pandemic made it so that, for a while there, it was emergency information updating every day.
Right.
And yeah, we didn't have the bodies to do, interesting profiles of local people.
Mhm. Mhm.
We didn't have, the resources for that. And we had to trim down really hard. And nothing gets added to, just like any job, nothing gets added to your plate without something else comes off.
Mhm.
And so it was a grind to get through. But I think some of the stuff that we had to do was about choosing, how we use our resources.
Mhm. Mhm.
Things like
Well,
fire updates and stuff like
yeah.
that.
Well, the reason I ask about the sort of the news cycle is, the internet news cycle is so
Mhm.
different. And as in general, people have shifted to online information and news sources. Partly in my mind, because they contain both the thoughtful pieces and the time sensitive ones. You can go one place and get all of that in theory. But I'm setting you up here narrowly because I think my understanding is really Humboldt Hot Air in a way evolved partly as a pandemic, as a response, as an online resource, primarily, right, and internet radio. So you want to share some thoughts about how your media outlet has been affected and adapted to COVID?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so we exactly that. We were really born out of COVID, which is really interesting. And I think that gives us definitely a different experience in that way. We've never seen an existence of Humboldt Hot Air without COVID. And yeah, it was just, it was interesting to hear what you were saying, Jennifer, about people in service work kind of really taking the grunt of it. For all of 2020 and most of 2021, or a lot of not most, like half of 2021, I was working as a cashier at a grocery store. I worked at Murphy's. So I was definitely like deep in it. It's like we never took a break. So even that like 2 weeks of lockdown when everyone was at home, I was still at work. And so it was really great to get to leave that. I left that also during COVID, and getting to start Humboldt Hot Air with kind of that perspective of kind of, it felt like a step back, and it felt like a relief from kind of the like intense COVID, surrounded by that at all times. And I think that that's what a lot of people kind of were seeing Humboldt Hot Air as, actually, is this relief from COVID. I know a lot of our DJs were people who, we have a handful of DJs who are people who used to DJ events in town, and were so excited to have a platform again, and never really thought that they would even maybe be on radio. But now that they didn't have their regular performance outlet, the radio is like, and I would say actually even not just DJs, but a lot of our or even not just event DJs, but a lot of the DJs that we have now are exactly people who are performers. And as a performer during COVID, there was no outlets for you. So a lot of our DJs were really, really thankful to be able to have this platform where they could perform in some way. We have also musicians. One of our shows on Monday nights is a local musician, James Zeller. And that was exactly why he wanted to join, was he was just like, I can't perform anywhere. And so what his show is, which is so fun, is that he performs himself on air. And then he also invites other local musicians, and they sing together and talk about their music. And every week he's got a different musician on there. And then he's also performing himself. So things like that was like really, he never thought he would be on radio, and then he got to do that, so it was cool. And then as far as the audiences, I think that I kind of mentioned this a little bit last week, but just the way that I think our culture was turning, we were kind of forced to turn into the internet, and to turn into streaming as something that's okay. Something like streaming concerts, I think, is like, we would have never really, no one really wanted to watch a streamed concert, but since COVID, that's something that people are more open to. And so I think that as people were already on the internet, they saw Humboldt Hot Air, and it wasn't a crazy concept to them at all, because they're already streaming things all the time. So how fun is it now that you can listen to one of your a local, someone in your community playing music, and you're already hanging out. So so yeah. But as far as like having to accommodate for COVID, we really haven't had to do very much. Our space is one room, so we only have the air studio. So we don't hang out there. It's just the DJ comes and does their shows and leaves. So we aren't really having to think too much about social distancing and things like that. Obviously we do, we've been sanitizing and stuff, but there's not very much interaction at Humboldt Air. So yeah.
Thanks, Naralee. I just add, from Access Humboldt's point of view, we certainly saw a lot of public meetings go virtualized, and that had changed how you cover and share and record and document and archive. So we feel that part of the the media landscape, the civic aspect, was totally transformed. We also saw that in, as you mentioned, the culture and arts performance spaces that got closed and shuttered. Many of them started installing cameras and microphones and figuring out how they could do live virtual streaming performances became the automatic response. If you have a venue and a space for production and people aren't coming to you, how do you get to them, right? So I think that those were observable shifts in the dynamic. And I think you're right, they've become more of a norm for people. And maybe that's because I think internet radio was not a new idea. It was a sort of an edge thing. And now that more people are online, it's become more of a mainstream thing, perhaps. So so to keep our conversation going, I might take this out of order, but let me set the stage a little bit, because really what we want to talk about is with you folks, who are doing the work, what does the future have in store for us? I think that might be too open-ended, and I wanted to make it a little more playful and say, give me a worst case scenario and a best case scenario. Like, what's the worst future we could have, and what's the best future we could have? But I don't know if we want to save that till later? Because then the next question is, or maybe this sets the stage for the other one. That is, how do you think our region compares with other areas? What are you hearing out there among your peers and colleagues and in the business elsewhere? Are we pretty much the same, or what's unique and different about our landscape and the way that we share and use information? And then we're going to wrap it up with sort of recommendations on how we can move forward. What's the best prospect for moving forward? So what do you think? I kind of want to jump right into what's the worst thing that could happen, but I don't know if that's helpful. Jennifer, did you want to kick us off here? And you pick which one of those questions. You can pick whatever question you want to answer, but yeah, if you want to go zombie, to go for
the
it.
Zombie apocalypse. Great. Is this not the worst case scenario?
Well, we're still here doing it. I still can pick up my paper, from the box.
That's true.
Every week.
We had during the blackouts, we were talking about, how much time we have until the cell towers go down. And, in an emergency, and, how much, what do we do if everything goes? And at some point we were like, well, dang, sandwich boards and bullhorns, I guess. Like we just at some point, but we've adapted to quite a bit. I don't want to say we can do anything because I'm knocking wood right now. We're a superstitious newsroom. I don't want to bring that evil on us, but I think, some of the worst case stuff is, trickling in. If you are advertising dependent, which, a number of our local outlets are, I don't think Humboldt Hot Airs, what's your structure? Are you
for money or financially?
Yeah.
So we're through the Arcata Playhouse, which is a 501c3. So
okay.
we've gotten grants as our main structure, and then we're starting to get underwriting here and there to help with that.
And then Joseph, you're operating partly on grants as well, I think, maybe.
Actually, mostly grants.
Mostly grants.
Not outside grant. We've got the Hoopa Valley Tribe and a Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So as long as we maintain our eligibility, yes.
Which is not to say that grants aren't also vulnerable to changes in the world. They certainly are, and it's scary every time you've got to go and budget from zero again. But for those of us who are, advertising dependent, it's been a wild ride. And between, COVID coming just as the cannabis industry is, really facing hard times, and that doesn't just affect the cannabis industry. If it was all just the cannabis industry, then we'd be like, oh, well, we'll have to figure out how to work without cannabis ads, right? But as everybody knows, the cannabis industry has been bolstering Humboldt's economy in a lot of ways for a lot of years. So if that craps out, now we have to look at how much money are restaurants going to have to advertising, how much for, everything from travel agencies to clothing stores are affected when a main moneymaker, just like fishing, just like logging, just like anything, has hard times. And then on top of that, the general hard times and COVID and everything else, that stuff is of real concern. I'm very grateful that figuring out the answer to it is not my job. But it's certainly part of, the issue of a publication's survival. And, we have looked at potential worst case scenario solutions like that. And I think a lot of papers have looked at that stuff and looked at, like I had mentioned, the places that have gone nonprofit, switched to other structures. Some of my worst case scenario thinking is about just straight, disaster preparedness. I came to Humboldt after the 2011 earthquake and subsequent tsunami in Japan, basically launched me and my family out of the country. So when I think worst case scenario, I'm literally thinking nuclear meltdown. And, we have disasters to look at. We had a quake yesterday. We've been writing about tsunami warning signs and stuff like, or sirens.
Mhm.
Some of our worst case scenario things are temporary, like disasters, but they have long consequences. Economic fallout also has long-term consequences. We don't just pop back out of an industry-wide drop. We're a rural community and things hit us hard. The same economic influences that are happening all over the country hit us hard here. The fact that we have so many media outlets makes us different than a lot of rural communities. A lot of them end up news deserts, but the fact that we've got all of this actually helps us. So I feel like we are essential in that way. Although essential, right? That's the backhanded compliment that means that you have to
Mhm. You have to
be
show
at the
up.
supermarket at the
Yeah.
cashier stand. But some of the worst case scenario stuff is stuff that we've had to kind of figure out on the fly over the past couple of years, like mental health, the stress of doing, our jobs and dealing with people who are also doing their jobs in difficult times. Those old movie stereotypes of like, hard drinking reporters. It doesn't work anymore. We do therapy now. We're trying to make a healthy newsroom. We're trying to make a newsroom that's sustainable, not just in the financial sense or in the sense of, sustaining an audience, which, of course we care about. But we're trying to make it so that we can keep the people we need. And another worst case scenario might be that, everybody just says, forget it to print or something. And then we have to shift. We have to find another way, just like we need to think about bullhorns and sandwich boards.
Mhm.
We've shifted a lot, as you mentioned, to our online content. And luckily in emergencies, because we're a free paper and a free website, we haven't had to switch to paywall or take down a paywall for emergencies. But yeah, we've kind of flirted with some worst case scenarios over the past few years.
Mhm.
So it both doesn't seem insurmountable, but it also doesn't seem impossible that it would come to pass. So I'm going to go knock wood again.
Okay, I didn't mean to ask you to focus on the negatives. I think you properly balanced them with there were silver linings on most of those negative scenarios that you talked about, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
They're
best
just
case.
changes really, right? In the way that your organization, as our other media outlets, are adapting pretty quickly, and it's both on the business side of the equation, on the audience expectation side, on the demands on content creators. I mean, that's all.
Yeah, I'm a writer. It's hard for me to think of the best case scenario.
You don't do science fiction, yeah.
Dystopian.
Joseph, though, the question here is looking forward. What do you see? What does the future have in store for us is the general question. Uh-oh, you're muted, I think. There we go.
Got my mic on.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the future look like? Is that what your question is?
Yeah. What's in store for our future?
I'm hoping our future will at least maintain what it has right now, even in this COVID times. Well, we are grant funded. The worst thing that happens with grants is that they expire in 12 months, and you don't know what's going to come after that.
Mhm.
So with this emergency funding through COVID, at least what they did with that is that they took off the limitations. So yeah, you could stretch this money out 10 years if you wanted to, but you wouldn't have much to spend. So that's why I did 2 years. And now we've got a couple other, or at least one other grant that we have there. And the worst possible thing that happens if we don't plan well. How do we use it? What do we call an emergency? If we're going to have money set aside for an emergency, and that I always heard it's a good business plan to have a year's income in reserve. And just in case something goes bad. Okay, that's how do you do that? Well, gee. So what if you put away a lot of money as an emergency fund? Then you have to identify, well, what would you consider an emergency? It's not like you have a slush fund. You could use it as a slush fund, and that is another worst case scenario. So poor planning is a worst case scenario. You gotta take a look at the worst possible things that could happen first, I believe. So you at least identify those things, and then you could try to how do you say mediate those things or avoid them with your best possible outcomes. How do you make it so that these best possible outcomes will come about? Because if you believe hardly in your worst possible outcomes, they become self-fulfilling prophecies. And just the reverse, if you believe in your best possible outcomes, they too become self-fulfilling prophecies. So you have to have that open discussion amongst all parties. Everybody that's involved in that business. So at the radio station, we got 4 staff, and the tribal council, that's 8 people. There has to be at least 12 people involved in this discussion. And that could be a best possible outcome if you can ever get that to happen. So the worst possible outcome is do nothing. That's the worst.
Joseph, can I want to ask you a follow-up. You mentioned on our last discussion that some of on the horizon, and this is happening now, that in the Hoopa Valley, the tribe is building fiber networks between all the tribal buildings, and potentially fiber to the home as a local network that will connect everybody. So I'm remembering that is a sort of a visionary ongoing effort of the tribe. And I know you and I have talked about this for decades, so it's not a brand new idea, but it's happening now. And then you also earlier today, you mentioned that you recognize your audience is more and more older people who are listening to radio, and the young ones are online. So is the future, let me just project a possible future, say, is the future that your daily update newscast is not so much important that I tune in right at noon when it's happening, because now it's posted as a podcast that I can go to online and pick up anytime in the next 24 hours. And more the content gets designed to be delivered online rather than over the air. That's sort of a question I have in my mind, right? It's like, the way people use online content is they reach out and take what they want now. They don't wait for it to, I'm not tuning in at noons. Like, I mean, maybe I am for sports, I guess, is the most live watched thing. And,
yes, I understand. And yes, I think we have to start adapting into the online content, and it has to be, we need the talent to actually accomplish that, so it has this appeal. And I don't think just slapping audio onto a podcast is necessarily going to work unless you construct that podcast as an online option. And so that again takes a little bit of shifting and production level. I could offer North Coast Journals, if your cell tower goes down, hey, put it up on radio. We got plenty of time. We only offer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So
I might call you.
Something. Yes, please do. We need more staff. Bring everybody along.
Well, we saw this happen. I'll just share, and this is part of the shift. I put in the chat a little note about a study that was just done that correlated internet access with health outcomes from COVID. The general idea being, if you have access online, you have better information and can make better decisions about what to do about COVID. I think that's, maybe I'm going beyond what the study found, but and I don't mean to be driving this conversation this way, but I think what we found is also misinformation travels very quickly online, and we found different communities were subjected to disinformation or misinformation campaigns that also had health outcomes that were negative. And when you think about beyond public health, those impacts occur, all the way, ripple out into all kinds of public policy and decision making about environment and land use, and and so forth, so on and so forth. The quality of our discourse and whether we can trust it or not. And I think another thing we found is people trust local information much more than they trust distant information. I mean, if I know where it's coming from and who's saying it, and I trust that they have curated that information, that they've done their own homework and that they're not just passing on some meme because it was fun.
That's what happened with us in COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And we have the Kamal Medical Center, and they have two excellent lead physicians there, and they were directly, and we even brought the CDC to help us out. And they were here for 2 weeks, and they're doing a lot of analyzing and giving us updates and answering people's questions live on the radio. So that helped out a lot.
This is part, I guess that's what
masks.
Well, that's kind of where I was going, is that there's an interesting shift in the dynamic, because we used to get requested by, say, Senator McGuire's office. We're going to do a town hall meeting. Can you guys help us put it on TV, put it on the, put it online for us? 2 or 3 years ago, that was the service that we were providing to them. Now the ask is, hey, we're already online. We're on Facebook Live, we're on Zoom. What we need is to reach people who aren't online. Can you put it on cable TV? Can you put it on radio? Can you put it in a newspaper and put it in a box on the corner? So isn't there a really interesting shift in the need for legacy media, let's say?
Well, interestingly, it's not exactly legacy media, and it's something that we've kind of wrestled with is, and Shauna talked to you about this a little bit. There have been communities that haven't been reached because DHHS or whatever don't have either outreach to those groups already, or it could be a straight language barrier thing. And I've reported a little bit on, Lao and Hmong communities, for example, where there's just not information available. Other states with higher populations of Lao and Hmong people, like in the Midwest and stuff, and in Texas and whatnot, they've got more resources in Lao and Hmong language, flyers and stuff, everything from, the beginning stuff where we were all like, okay, so do you have to wipe down your groceries or not? Having that information distributed, there were organizations locally that really worked hard on making sure that that information was available in Spanish, and in some cases in indigenous languages that, people who are, say, immigrated from Mexico but don't speak Spanish. There were a lot of people who kind of fell through the cracks. And, when I talked to some Lao folks about, well, what do your parents listen to? Where do they get their information? And, no lie, they're not picking up the journal. There are some cases watching, TV from overseas, YouTube channels. And, the people I talk to, they're also worried about like their parents getting misinformation and stuff like that. And so, there is a gap for a lot of people. There's a gap in terms of generationally, people who use internet versus who rely on TV and news on paper. And then there's also a cultural gap, and there are little pockets, communities that add up to quite a lot of people who aren't getting their news in the same places where, where we might expect. We can't just, if our mission really is partly about, the public good and uplifting the voices of people who are, often dismissed, being a voice for the voiceless, then we can't just focus on the people who are already reading our paper. And we can't just focus on the people and say like, well, we posted it online, we're done. We have to figure out ways to reach out and find those communities and find those people. And, our destiny as a county is intertwined. And, if that means that we need to figure out a way to make sure that, this corner gets the same information as that corner, one of the great things about being a free paper or about being in radio is, homeless people can hear it. Homeless people can read it. You don't need money to get the information. And in Humboldt County, that's a significant population.
No contract.
Yep. Whereas internet is generally a cost per month thing, a subscription fee.
Yeah. And we're not, as much as I absolutely believe in really pushing our online presence and making ourselves ubiquitous in that sense, we also try to make ourselves ubiquitous by working with Access Humboldt, by working with pretty much anybody who will share our information, partly because we need to reach everybody. I like the fact that a homeless person can pick up the Journal and have the same information as, a bank president. It makes me feel good.
And the little mustaches are already pre-drawn on the pictures.
Yes. Crossword filled out.
Well, it's such a diverse way, issues across the, landscape, the media landscape. And so I think I want to ask you to maybe respond to one last question before we open it up, if there are any other folks on the call who want to chime in with questions. But and this is just what are some of the goals that you have for your organization in terms of building, towards that preferred future outcome? And what are some of the things you'd love to see happening for the media landscape on the North Coast? So Naralee, why don't I start with you?
Hi, I'm trying to unmute. Yeah, so it's like interesting to be thinking about. I didn't answer the last question either, so I'm going to answer a little bit and get into that. Interesting to think about worst case scenarios and thinking about natural, and my brain immediately goes to natural disaster. And when I think about natural disaster, one of the first things to go is the internet, along with power, which the internet needs power to access it. Although that's not true, because you can access the internet on your phone. So if the power's out, you can often still use your phone. But generally, the internet isn't super reliable. So and radio really is. And definitely radio, I think it becomes more and more relevant as we kind of go deeper into the climate crisis, honestly, because when there's big storms, the power goes out, things like that. So I think radio is probably realistically, as FM radio, is going to become more important. So that would be, that's definitely a reason maybe to transition Humboldt Hot Air, but we'll see. And then as far as like the future and things like that, we're based out of Arcata, and it feels like Arcata is in a very transitional moment right now. The Arcata Playhouse specifically is located in what is now, as of very recently, known as the Gateway District. I don't know how much you guys know about the Gateway District, but basically they're preparing for the huge influx in the population of Arcata, and specifically within this district. They're hoping to do a lot of things, but mostly accommodate a lot of housing is what they're planning on doing. And so the Arcata Playhouse has been hosting a lot of, we've been having a lot of meetings about it, kind of trying to steer the city in a direction that we like, that supports us, that supports the Playhouse, and supports that community and the community of Arcata as a whole. So as we're thinking about our community, it's interesting for me to keep in mind what is the community now and what's the community going to be in 5 years. And I would like to serve both of those. So thinking about that, and I guess that's kind of a goal of mine, is to stay in touch and like keep my hands on the ground, and finding out, as we're going to go through all of these big changes over the next few years, to be able to change with Arcata and Humboldt, but really specifically Arcata, as HSU becomes Cal Poly, which already has happened, and we have all these new students coming in, and they're going to kind of switch things up. And so, yeah, that's a goal for Humboldt Hutter, is just to kind of stay on the ground and move with the changing tides.
Nice. Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, I sorry, I can't resist a little silly brainstorming, but I was thinking about us synergistically working backwards from online radio to over the air. You could do a thing where you collaborate with the ham radio operators and have them pick up your feed online and then retransmit it over ham radio. And you could do like a ham radio network live show.
Totally. One of
Anyways.
our DJs the other day was telling me that she did a little broadcast just to her block of Humboldt Hot Air, which I was like, that's cool. She was like, me and all my neighbors were tuned in, and I was like, nice.
I think the future might be more about pirate radio, Joseph, than the official stuff that you've built. Can I ask you to go next, Joseph, on this question of, what would you like to see for your organization and for the whole media landscape on the North Coast? What would you like to see? Like, what are your goals?
Who's the question to?
You.
This is to you now for your organization, though, whichever one you want to do. You want to do your new virtualized organization or your former?
Well, I would like to have, as for my organization, is I want to stay in native media, and I would limit that just to radio. I would like to do the podcast thing, and now I'm venturing, saying, do I want to go internet radio too? And that's why my question is there a limit? What is the minimal amount of broadcast time you have to have, since you're not under the FCC regulations? So that's something to consider. Could I hook up, when you just mentioned ham radio, there was a doctor from Kamal Medical Center who said, hey, I like to do a health show on the radio. And I said, great, come on. And then COVID hit, and this Omicron pandemic wing of it just exploded on us. And he just says, out of time now. So I thought, wow, he's a ham operator. And so is our engineer. He also is a ham operator. He's got the license anyway. I don't think he actually practices. And I bought the house I'm in right now. It's got a ham radio antenna on top, just laying down the side. So somebody had a ham radio here. So I don't know, maybe I picked that up. But I think that opening up a network like what you've done right here, you've got a network of local media all on this one screen, and now we've had this discussion, worst possible, best possible, future outcomes. If we can keep this up, why cannot we share and exchange this information and viewpoints? I mean, we have a lot of different same information, but we have different viewpoints of all of it. So I think that is very refreshing. So if there's
Nice.
a way we can do that, that would be nice.
Sweet. Thanks, Joseph. If you don't mind, a quick follow-up. I know Allie hasn't been able to join us, but the tribe also invested in a newspaper outlet, right? The Two Rivers Tribune. Do you see the more or less? Do you see that as an important collaborator for you? Do you see what opportunities do you see across the radio and print platforms and for the Valley?
Well, we do that right now. We've done more of that in the last 6 months. and everybody's talked about that. The tribal council wanted us to combine our services, put us under one roof, they said. But what they also meant was make it so that it would be cheaper for them to operate two services within one. And me and Allie just said, no, she is a enterprise. She is a for-profit business. I'm a nonprofit business. And she has her angles on what she works on, and I have mine. And so we never did get that resolved. We just resisted really hard. We put our heels in the ground. And then of late, I do this regular program every week. I do what I call a Friday edition, and I interview people doing good things in the community, good things in their community. And if I can't find a topic or somebody to come in, I will go online, I'll look at things, and I'll come up with a story that I will either invite somebody else in, or I will, like this upcoming one, I got one from the Ethnic Media Services. They did a story, a panel discussion of doctors and researchers talking about the vulnerable age group of 5 to 11-year-olds during this pandemic, and what things that they have been experiencing, and what illnesses have they been catching, and how does it look for them, and what is the statistics on their vaccination rates. And it was really an interesting program. So it was about 59 minutes that I condensed to taking out a lot of side comments and boiling it down to 30 minutes and 29 seconds with bookends. And so I think what I do when I do those, I transcribe them. I use Otter AI to do my transcriptions, and then I have to go back and edit those transcriptions because sometimes they get them garbled. So then I email that transcription to my wife, who is working with the Two Rivers Tribune, and she'll take that transcription and she'll write her own version of this is what happened, giving credits to the radio station and to the other people in the story.
Nice.
And so that has been our most recent collaboration.
So forced collaboration wasn't the best idea, but on your own terms, it's working.
Yes, on our own terms. Yes, we figured out how to do this. And I think we can continue doing this because I know I'm not going to stop doing the interviews in the Valley. And just, hopefully I can get a gig to pay me to do it. Maybe I'll work with the school district. Maybe I'll work with the health organization.
Hey.
Or
Well, I have to remind you, there's free airtime for you on the coast if you want to share your Friday edition show with KZZH.
Absolutely.
I'm sure we can make
there's
that
another
happen.
network. Yeah. And since we've got the transcriptions, I don't know, we do some columns to the North Coast Journal. I don't know.
Gee, you don't know anybody over there?
I don't know.
So Jennifer, the big sort of ending question is, what do you what would you like to see in the North Coast, and what are your goals as an organization?
Well, I do like collaboration, and I do like, we've done some collaboration and some partnerships with other media and stuff, but I'm a Scorpio. I still like to fight. So I also don't want to be under the umbrella. I want us to be able to disagree, and I want us to be able to, push different views on the stories. Like, I think it's a good thing that the Time Standard covers, Annie's Cambodian one way and we cover it another way.
Mhm.
And some of that has to do with daily urgency, and some of it has to do with, just perspective, the kind of writing that we do. I also like, I'm totally going to hit Joseph up for some freelance at some point.
Sounds like you got him. Yeah, sounds like he's available.
But I think also, part of our thing is, as I was saying about like the need to reach into different communities, I think, a lot of that has to do with our roll call of writers. And one of the things that we need, I've worked in the last years to try and increase the number of people of color and BIPOC people who are writing for our paper in a meaningful way. And when I say in a meaningful way, I mean not just like it's Black History Month, so we're gonna like have one Black writer write one story about being Black. It's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for depth of coverage and constant input, and and the kinds of creative input and pitching of ideas, and really getting a truly broad range of voices, not only talking about their identity, but different perspectives on our world, which people of color live every aspect of life, not just the aspect that is the thing that they check off on a form, not just that. So having more people on my end of the paper, for example, reviewing movies, to writing about food, to writing about outdoor stuff, that's an important goal for us. And I think we've increased the kind of breadth of our freelancers for sure, and of our staff. But I don't have steady Black writers on roll all the time, and I don't have a steady round of Lao and Hmong writers, for example, Southeast Asian writers. There's a lot of stuff we still want. We got a lot on our to-do list and our to-get list. Some of our goals for future include, being able to do long-term, in-depth projects that are, maybe long-term, multi-part things. There are lots of things that we daydream about because we're nerds. And there are things that, I would like us to be everywhere, unavoidable, on every platform. I'm not willing to do TikTok dances, however, and I think that's best for everyone. You saw me trying to unmute myself. That's not going to work. I think also being able to be a more flexible staff and to attack our stories and our workload in a more flexible way in the past 2 years has really opened our minds to some other kinds of flexibility, and really making it so that our staff can contribute more, can be more creative. And like I said in the previous talk, the journal recently bought the Ferndale Enterprise and is doing more in the Eel River Valley. But I think we need more reach and more insight into what's happening all over Humboldt in sort of more far-flung areas, which are tough for us to cover from a centralized location. We're covering more in the way of local government, local meetings and things like that. We're trying to staff up in that direction. And those things are, as we've seen in the past few years, they have national impact. The small decisions that get made in, at the county level, at the city level can have far-reaching impact. So we're really, we're taking Humboldt seriously in that way, and, trying to get everything and try not to go crazy while we're doing it.
Great. Well, thank you so much to all of you for sharing your points of view. We don't need to wrap up right now, but I think I have to sort of, for Access Humboldt, I have to say it's part of our goal is to support all the diverse media outlets that we have. So I think, to your point, Jennifer, that it's better. We don't just want one really, really good media outlet. We need diversity in the media landscape. And I think part of our work at Access Humboldt, where we lucked out and had some introductions to Internews, and then engaged with them to do that information ecosystem assessment, just that whole general framework that gives us a way of looking at the media landscape and saying, okay, does everybody have a voice? How do you find out what you want to find out? and of course, our findings mapped very clearly to what you're describing. There are gaps in our media landscape. Native voices are underserved. Diverse BIPOC voices are underserved. Geographically, certain areas get no coverage or aren't heard from or don't receive information. So I think we know that collectively as a community, these are issues that we want to address over time. So this was really the motivation for Access Humboldt to launch this Redwoods Listening Post endeavor. So we're going to keep pursuing grants, not just for ourselves, but to keep seeding the ground for more diverse voices and to, share that, figure out ways to support these collaborations, because it requires some effort on both parties' side. I'm among the many fans of Libby Maynard at Ink People, who just retired, and one of her very wise sayings was, well, collaboration is the best way, but it's not the easiest way. Which is a humbling reminder. We really have to appreciate each other constantly to make it work, so that when we disagree, we can still get back together and build something together. So that's our hope with Redwoods Listening Post, is that we'll be able to host these kinds of gatherings and conversations and facilitate, ideas and collaboration across media outlets. So I'm reminding you that tomorrow we're going to have a presentation by Jesse Hardman, who's the national coordinator of the Listening Post Collective, which is a internews project across the country that facilitates basically diversity and equity kinds of journalistic endeavors in markets all over the country.